Muhammad's early more peaceful recitations from back when he lived in Mecca, such as "no compulsion in religion," are inconsistent with his later calls for his followers to fight, strike terror into the hearts of, and smite the unbelievers at the neck of his post-Medina days. For this reason, Islamic scholars understand Muhammad's revelations to be a linear progression, with later revelations displacing earlier ones where conflict arises, particularly since Muhammad declared it himself in answer to the critics of his day that pointed out his self-contradiction. When we substitute one revelation for another and Allah knows best what he reveals in stages, they say, "Thou art but a forger." Thus the later stages of his revelations substitute for his earlier revelations when discrepancies arise. None of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better. Assad's translation is perhaps more clear. Any message which we annul or consign to oblivion, we replace with a better one. Al-Nask wal Masuk is the Islamic doctrine of abrogation and title of the classic book by an Islamic scholar that details abrogated verses and what they have been abrogated by. Google the term Nask for more. By way of comparison, the revelation of Yahweh to mankind spans a period of 16 centuries from Moses to the Messiah and his apostles. Over those 1600 years, mankind progressed from being desert-dwelling nomads to establishing advanced nations with religious laws of the Sanhedrin, as well as the civil law of kings and emperors. In fact, the first mechanical computer, the Antikythera mechanism, was built a century or two before the Christian era. Yahweh revealed himself to his people through a progression of prophets and witnesses as mankind developed. However, the Quran's 71 surahs that are subject to abrogation, out of only 114 total, recited over the brief 23-year span of a single person's revelations, doesn't suggest divine inspiration as much as the changing whims of its author. To quote Don Richardson from Secrets of the Quran, by Muhammad's day, 1,500 years had passed since any Hebrew prophet was described in the Old Testament as using a sword in the service of God. Neither Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Micah, Amos, Malachi, nor any other later Hebrew prophet is described as using the sword or prescribing its use. The 1,600-year record of Yahweh culminated in the revelation of the Messiah, the Prince of Peace, the sinless Lamb of God, while Muhammad's revelations progressed in the exact opposite direction, from peaceful to violent. Muhammad is barely able to win 100 converts during the first 13 years of his more peaceful revolutions in Mecca. Then Muhammad and his followers left Mecca for Medina in 622 AD, known as the Hijra, where he enlisted a couple of local bandit tribes, picked up the sword, and began the spread of Islam through imperialistic conquest and subjugation of the vanquished to his religion. The Islamic calendar doesn't even begin until this Hijra flip from peaceful to violent. Thus the surah from Muhammad's early Mecca days, "Let there be no compulsion in religion," is abrogated by about 100 verses that suggest violence against non-Muslims as the better substitute from his later post-Hijra days, like, "I will instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers, smite ye above their necks, and smite all their fingertips off them," and "fight those, even if they are the people of the book," that is, Christians and Jews, "until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." The word jizya means penalty and is a tax levied on those attacked and vanquished so their new masters can parasitize the fruit of their labor. It is a protection tax that works the way the mafia sells protection to restaurant bar owners and shopkeepers to protect them from the mafia. Non-Muslims were to feel enslaved, and as they paid the tax to their Islamic masters, they were subject to being slapped across the face to further humiliate them and reinforce the nature of the relationship. Those that submitted to Muhammad's religion were not subject to the jizya tax, just like young people in the U.S. that convert to Islam will not be forced to buy health insurance under Obamacare. Please Google Obamacare dimitude or visit the subject in our forum to understand more about how dimitude works. Muhammad even recited a contradiction that contradicts his tacit admissions of contradiction. Do they not consider the Quran with care? They would surely have found therein much discrepancy. Naive Westerners indoctrinated through dissimulation into Muhammad's standalone 7th century religion parrot what they have been taught about Islam being a religion of peace. True Muslims that live in the cradle of Muhammad's religion, that imitate Muhammad's own deeds, view Muslims that reject the 1400-year Islamic goal of imperialistic conquest of all the kingdoms of the world as apostates. This is why Muslims on the sidelines remain largely silent in regard to Islamic terrorism. Others that proclaim Islam to be a religion of peace may be purveyors of taqiyya, or Islamic subterfuge and dissimulation, whitewashing Islam to deceive folks in non-Islamic states into accepting it until they gain the power to begin making demands. These deceivers are the ones so often spotlighted by Western media dupes, even as the same pundits remain silent on Muhammad's followers' responsibility for the killing of over 2 million innocents in the Sudan alone, let alone their persecution of Christians all around the rest of the world. When Muhammad's call to violence against non-Muslims is pointed out to Western Muslims, many have been trained to cry, "You're taking those verses out of context," suggests that they are references to specific events. But to this I would ask of our Muslim friends, which of the following imperialistic conquests, the Islamic first jihad, were Muhammad's followers not to instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers and smite ye above their necks? It's obvious that Islam has not been a religion of peace from the beginning of the Islamic calendar at Hijrah, with Muhammad himself having had 800 Jewish farm boys and their dads of the Banu Qurayza brought before him and beheaded while sexually enslaving their wives and children and stealing their property. Indeed, by the time the Islamic hordes arrived in Tours, France in 732, they were traveling with so much stolen property, or as the Quran calls it, booty, that it impeded their escape after their failed assault. Nor is Islam a religion of peace today, with over 16,000 deadly Islamic terror attacks around the world just since 9/11, as meticulously logged by the folks at the religionofpeace.com, that were perpetrated by those that behave as Muhammad did. As Benjamin Netanyahu said, if the Arabs put down their weapons today, there would be no more violence. The Jews put down their weapons today, there would be no more Israel. Muslim leaders vow to drive the Jews into the sea and kill all the Jews and conquer Israel, in part because Muslims enjoy more freedom in Israel's democracy today than Muslims do in any Islamic state. Perhaps nothing is more diametrically opposed to Islam than freedom. Ironically, Western peace-loving Muslims are cheering on their own destruction, because just as Muhammad's call to violence abrogates his earlier notions of peace, the most violent of Muhammad's true followers that strike terror into the hearts of the innocent will be the ultimate arbiters of Islam, nullifying any peacenik apostates that find it repugnant to imitate the violent behavior of their prophet. Blessedly, according to Islamic scholars, 75% of so-called converts to Islam in the U.S. leave within a few years. probably much of the 25% left are women that are stuck with children with Muslim husbands and converted prisoners and such. To our Muslim friends, why not come out of Muhammad's standalone 7th century religion and prostration toward the courageous black stone idol and Kaaba in Mecca to join us in following the one true God through the Prince of Peace, the sinless Messiah, the Lamb of God. That which we have seen and heard declare we unto you, that ye also may have fellowship with us, and truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son Jesus Christ. For discussion of the subject, please join us in the Islam Christian Forum at the first link below the video. The drop-down menu below this video contains lots of links to other videos and resources regarding abrogation and more. Please visit brotherpete.com.